All right, everybody, welcome back to another LorcanaCast deck tech. Today we are going to be talking about hand disruption using Amber and Emerald, and this is probably one of my favorite cards in the entire set. You have forgotten me. But before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe and smash that notifications bell because, Lorcana is going to be coming out really soon, and we are going to be doing a lot of deck building, a lot of deck assessments, and just kind of helping people understand what cards do, how decks function, what combo lines are, and all kinds of cool stuff. Also, if you're enjoying this series, please leave a comment and let us know what deck do you want to see, what color combinations do you want to see, and we'd be more than happy to build decks and talk about them. So first off, let's talk about hand disruption and what it aims to do. So in Lorcana, cards are a premium. You use your cards as glimmers, you use your cards as actions, items, and you use your cards as ink or resources. So every card in your hand is built upon some kind of strategy and getting to said strategy. So the idea behind this deck is to play cards like You Have Forgotten Me, which says each opponent chooses and discards 2 cards. Hilariously, this deck works really, really well in both single player and multiplayer. And as a disclaimer, we just want to be very upfront. This is not necessarily built to combat the meta. This is not necessarily built to be the best deck in format. This is just built to be a fun deck. It does have good matchups into the current meta, but it's also really fun to play with your friends. And if you're playing with a multiplayer match with 3 or 4 people, ooh, you get value out of cards like these, especially like Sudden Chill that says each opponent chooses and discards a card. All of these discard actions target each opponent. So everyone but you is going to be sacrificing cards from their hand depending on what you're playing. So if you want to be really annoying and force your opponents to kind of suffer, this is a fun deck. If you're playing in a 1v1 match, it's also really good because if your opponents don't have cards in their hands, then they're stuck top decking the entire game. So let's go through the deck. Let's take a look at what the cards look like, and I'm going to take a drink of water before we do. All right, so first off, we've got Lilo. This is pretty much a standard lore battery in Amber. She's a 1 cost, 1 strength, 1 willpower, 2 pips of lore. You just put her on the board and quest. If your opponent has an answer, they have an answer. If they don't have an answer, you get lore. Very straightforward. Next up, we have Stitch New Dog. We are running 3 copies of Stitch Rockstar here in the deck. So you have 4 copies of New Dog, which are just fundamentally really easy targets for shifting. If you get it, great. If you don't, also fine. It's just another target, another tool to accelerate your deck profile. Then we have the Cruella De Vil, Miserable as Usual, 2 ink, 1/3, 1 pip of lore. She's really here to be annoying when this character is challenged and banished, so it has to be on defense. You may return chosen character to their player's hand. So again, in multiplayer, this is a fun tool for negotiation. In single player, you just quest with her over and over and over again, and either your opponent gets her off the board with some kind of removal, or they challenge and banish her, and she bounces something back into their hands. Very, very straightforward. All right, next up is another tool to keep cards out of your opponent's hand. This is Flynn Rider, the Charming Rogue. He is a 2 cost, 1 strength, 2 willpower, 2 lore pips. Great card. Probably one of the better 2-drop cards in the game as a character. And his ability, Here Comes the Smolder, states, whenever this character is challenged, the challenging player chooses and discards a card. So something to clarify with Flynn Rider, if the opponent doesn't have a card, they can still challenge him because the ability says whenever this character is challenged, the challenging player chooses and discards. So once you've challenged, if you have a card or don't have a card, the effect is going to resolve. So most people, if they want to challenge into him, will try and dump their hand and then challenge pretty safely. However, early game, very unlikely they're going to challenge into Flynn because they don't want to lose a card. Also, he's a really great tool to sing the next card we're going to talk about, and that is Sudden Chill. It is a 2-drop action song that states each opponent chooses and discards a card. So this is a part of the hand disruption strategy. You don't net any value, unfortunately, but you disrupt the opponent. So you play Sudden Chill or sing it, however you want to utilize it. You get a card out of your hand. Your opponent gets a card out of their hand. So you're not getting a +1 like when you do with the 4-drop that we're going to talk about here. However, you can use Flynn Rider to sing. So you exert him. You sing Sudden Chill for free. Each opponent chooses and discards a card. And then if they want to challenge him, they have to discard a second card. So it puts the opponent in a very awkward place early game, because your mulligan usually gives you a very finely crafted hand. You have cards that you specify for sending to the inkwell. You have cards you specify to play on turns 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. So building up that board, having that consistency is very important, and missing an ink drop, missing a character drop is very, very bad. So your opponent generally, as far as I've seen in testing, if you sing Sudden Chill with Flynn Rider, they don't want to challenge him because their hand is going to be very low. Their options are going to be very low. And he's a 1-2. It doesn't feel very good. Sometimes they do, or they think they do, but very, 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 very rarely will they ever challenge Flynn Rider on turn 3 and pay. Basically, they would pay 3 cards that turn. Normally, you see people ink 1 card from their hand, play a card that costs 3, and then if they challenge Flynn Rider, they would have to pay an additional card to do that, on top of the fact they lost a card with Sudden Chill. So their hand is just dwindling so quickly that Flynn is usually pretty safe with this combo. But yeah, if you can get Sudden Chill off on turn 3, that is extremely disruptive, because then you set up the play for this one right here, and that's going to be You Have Forgotten Me on turn 4. And if your opponent has no cards in their hand, they're top decking and they're just praying to get answers to your board state. They're hoping to draw something. And if they have a bunch of cards that are not inkable and they don't have that threshold, say they need 5 ink to play a card and they only have 4 ink on the board, and they draw a non-inkable card, their turn is over. They can't do anything. They can't ink the card. They can't play the card. They can only use the tools they have available to them that's on the board. And this deck doesn't really want to let your opponent keep too much on the board anyways. So let's keep going through what you have available to mess with your opponent. Next up, we have the Cheshire Cat, one of my favorite cards by far. 3 cost, 0/3, 2 pips of lore. Great ability. When this character is challenged and banish the challenging character. Now, before we talk about that, I'm going to take another sip of water here. And Cheshire Cat is one of the best defensive tools in the game. You just quest. You quest, and your opponent has to answer this character. If they're playing Steel, you should expect to see a smash to take Cheshire Cat off the board. If they're not running Steel, I mean, I've seen people use Let It Go and Dragon's Fire to get rid of Cheshire Cat, but on average, they're gonna have to sacrifice a character into Kitty, and that just doesn't feel great. Now, there are counters to Cheshire Cat, like the 1-drop. What's wrong with my brain? The Captain Hook. You also have Prince Eric at 2-drop with Challenger, so he's a 3/3 when he attacks. You could also get hit with a Rafiki. I mean, Cheshire Cat is by no means invulnerable, but he is a great tool to get lore into your lore pool and force your opponent to expend resources to, get him off the board. And the nice thing is, if he goes, whatever takes him out is also banished alongside. So it's always a 1-for-1, which is great. You generally get 2 lore or 4 lore and a body. Great trade for 3 ink. All right, moving on, we have Mother Knows Best. This is a piece of control in this deck. It's another song. You can return chosen character to their player's hand. You can sing this with a character that costs 3 or more. You can exert them and not have to pay the ink cost. Another very versatile tool. You can use this on pretty much anything you're having problems with. If you run into an evasive package, if you run into anything but ward, you can easily get those cards into your opponent's hand. And if you have the combo play, you can exert a character to sing Mother Knows Best for free, bounce a character back to their hand, and then hit them with some kind of hand disruption where they have to pitch a card. And if that's one of the only cards in their hand, then you just got rid of a major threat. So Mother Knows Best is a really great tool. It's also a great piece of tempo disruption. If you can play Mother Knows Best over and over, and your opponent keeps trying to play a big lore battery, say, they're trying to play like a brave little Tailor Mickey, and you use Mother Knows Best, and then they play it again, use Mother Knows Best. They're spending a lot of ink for not much, and you're spending little ink at 3, or you're exerting your characters to sing this for free to keep their big threats off the board. So this can be an absolute game changer if used properly. Next up, we have Hans, the Scheming Prince. This is a 4-cost 3/3 lore battery. He's just here because he has 3 pips of lore. It's really simple. He's a very aggressive card. Your opponent has to answer him. If he quests more than once, you're just getting excessive value out of the card. It's just silly using 1 card to get 6 lore. So play him often, play him early, get him on the board, and just quest for town. Next up, we have Rapunzel. Now, we only have 3 copies of this legendary. She's a 4-cost, 1/5, 2 pips of lore, but we're using her for her ability. This is one of your very few draw options in the deck. Gleam and Glow says, when you play this character, remove up to 3 damage from one of your characters. Draw a card for each 1 damage removed this way. So if we look at our late game package, we have some big bodies like the 4/5 Maximus with Bodyguard, the 5/5 John Silver, the 3/6 Mother Gothel, and the 3/5 Stitch Rockstar. So all of these characters are big enough that they can swing or challenge into something, take some damage. Then after you've made the attack, you play Rapunzel, heal the damage that they just took, and draw cards. And by the time you get those bigger bodies onto the board, your opponent is going to have things. They're going to have characters that deal 3 or 4 damage. So you're going to be able to trade favorably where you challenge them, you banish the thing, you take some damage, you play Rapunzel, you heal the damage, and then you draw cards. Normally, you're going to draw 2 or 3 cards off of a Rapunzel play. So she's going to see play late game, but this is a really, really great way to trade into your opponents, activate abilities like John Silver or Bodyguard with Maximus, and then you just get value, honestly. If you can set up the combo play, you can take a body off the board, heal your character almost to full or up to full, and draw cards, all for ink. I mean, it's really, really good. Like, Rapunzel is a very, very powerful combo piece if used appropriately. But yeah, you only want 3 in my opinion. I don't think you want 4 because there's only so many instances where she's useful and her ability triggers and gets you value. Like, healing for 1 and just replacing her, it's not really where you want to be. You generally want to heal 2 or 3 so that you're getting some card advantage of +1 or +2 for this exchange. So use her wisely, but she can absolutely swing games into your favor by getting you cards that you need, keeping your big characters healthy. Especially with John Silver, it's really gross if you play him, give something reckless, then you can challenge in. So let's take a look at him. So when you play this character and whenever he quests, chosen opposing character gains reckless. So you can use him on the play to give something reckless. You can quest and give reckless, or you can challenge into something and then you can heal him with Rapunzel, so on and so forth. It's just value, value, value. All right, moving along. Tinkerbell is a 4-drop. She has 2 strength, 3 willpower, 2 pips of lore. She has evasive. She's really there just as an evasive character to gain lore. If your opponent doesn't have evasive, she can quest very safely. She also has an ability, Pixie Dust. When you play this character, chosen character gains evasive this turn. So traditionally, your turn 4, you want to play You Have Forgotten Me and force your opponent to discard 2 cards. This Tinkerbell is not intended to be played on turn 4 unless you don't have You Have Forgotten Me. You want to mulligan really hard for this card. If you can get this off on turn 4, generally your opponent has 0 or 1 cards in their hand. Like, that is oppressive, especially when they're looking at this long form game and on turn 4 their hand is completely just stripped away from them. That's amazing. That's the entire purpose of this deck, is to remove options and keep your opponent on the back foot. But Tinkerbell is here for 2 reasons. 1, she's a evasive character, so she can, again, quest safely if there are no evasive characters on the board. But number 2, when you play this character, chosen character gains evasive this turn. So guess what? You can give one of your really big bodies, say, John Silver, a 5/5. You can turn him into evasive, and then you can swing or challenge into a Pongo, a Tigger, Goofy, whatever. I mean, giving anything evasive on command is great because you can utilize that effect to surprise your opponent and go, hey, I've got this Maximus on my board. He's just not kind of doing anything. My opponent is questing with a Tigger, and then you slap down and play Tinkerbell and say, hey, Pixie Dust, we're going to put you on Maximus. Tigger is a 4/4, Maximus is a 4/5, and so you just get this really good trade where Maximus challenges, banishes the Tigger, Tigger goes away, Maximus still has 1 health, and then, perhaps you have an extra 4 ink. It's, maybe turn 8 or whatever. You play Rapunzel, boom, Maximus is pretty healthy. You heal 3 off of him. So he's got, he took 4 damage in the exchange. So yeah, he's got 1 damage on his character. You heal 3, you draw 3 cards. Value, just flat value. So yeah, Tinkerbell can be used aggressively for questing. She can also be used to take out other evasive characters if you're having a matchup of that kind. She's just a really good utility card in this deck, depending on the matchup. All right, next up, this is the linchpin of the deck. You Have Forgotten Me. I cannot explain how dirty this card is. I mean, if you've never played this on someone on turn 4, get ready to watch people get really upset when they don't have any cards in their hand, and now they are stuck top decking. And if they're not playing Amethyst, ooh, that hurts really, really bad. If they're playing Steel, you can kind of force them into the Whole New World play because they just don't have any gas. They have no resources. And if they see a Whole New World, they're going to have to play it in order to, keep up tempo. What's funny is if you use You Have Forgotten Me and empty their hand and they draw a Whole New World on turn 5, they can't play it because they don't have the ink for it. It's dirty. This card is absolutely amazing. I love it. I won quite a few games at the Gen Con top 8, the deck challenge. I mean, it's one of those things where if you haven't played it on paper, it looks kind of strange. You pay 4 ink, you discard a card, your opponent discards 2 cards. Is it really that good? Just try it. Try it on your opponents, try it on your friends, try it at locals. Just try it and see what happens. I think you'll be very happy. Now, a word of warning, if you play it on turn 5 or later, it's okay. You really want to try and hit this on turn 4. That's where it has the most significant impact. Now, if you get it on turn 5, you'll get big impact as well. You'll probably empty their hand out again. But there's so many big cards that hit on turn 5 that are not inkable. So things like Grab Your Sword, Whole New World, Dragon's Fire, all kinds of big plays that the opponent needs 1 card to ink and 1 card to play. And if you take those options away from them, now they're dead drawing. And it feels really good when they draw a card on turn 5, they don't ink it, so you immediately know it's one of a very limited amount of options. So now you can play around it, depending on what color you're playing against. And it disrupts their tempo. If they don't have a card to ink and they don't have a character to play or a card to play, they're just kind of behind a turn. And then if it happens again on turn 6, now you really have the gas in your favor because they're not inking cards, they're not playing cards, they're not doing anything, they're just top decking and sitting. And that's a really good feeling with this kind of deck. You just want to keep disruption, you want to keep pressure, you want to keep the opponent really limited on resources. So mulligan heavily for You Have Forgotten Me. Now that doesn't mean you want to miss your tempo, you don't want to miss your turn 1, 2, and 3 play if at all possible. But really, really, really big thing about this deck. Mulligan as hard as you can safely for You Have Forgotten Me. It pays in dividends. It's super, super fun. All right. Next up is the Mad Hatter 2/4, 5 ink, 3 pips of lore. This card is here because he could potentially draw cards because his ability states, whenever this character is challenged, you may draw a card. A 2/4 is nothing to write home about. Stat line is okay. 3 pips of lore is very good. Your opponent cannot ignore it. However, he's not going to stay on the board very long. He can get challenged and managed pretty easily, but his ability to draw cards when he's challenged is really what you're paying that 5 ink for. If you can set the board upright and keep your opponent very low on resources, Generally, it takes 2 challenges to get him off the board, or 1 challenge and 1 piece of direct damage like cannons or smash. So on average, he's going to replace himself with a challenge, and then you draw a card. If you can get lucky, he'll draw 2 cards, and you're just winning the game at this point with just card advantage, card value. So Mad Hatter, really great lore battery, really great ability. Get him on the board as soon as you can, and he does very well. All right, Maximus is he's the protector for your tail end characters. So if you have a Mad Hatter on the board, you kind of don't want a Maximus because you want the Hatter to get challenged. You want to take some damage. You want him to get hit. You want to draw cards. Maximus is really good at protecting the next 3 things we're about to talk about. But he's a 5-drop, 4/5, bodyguard, and support. Whenever he quests, you may add his power to another character. So you can give everything in your field a +4. It just depends on who you want to get a +4. You can give Flynn Rider a +4. Now he becomes a 5/2. You can give it to Cheshire Cat to become a 4/3. You probably don't want to do that. What else? Tinkerbell can become a 6/3. So she can challenge into pretty much anything that has evasive that's not a Brave Little Tailor Mickey. Rapunzel can turn into a 5/5. Hans can be a 6/3. Support is just such a powerful ability. Realistically, though, Maximus is here for bodyguard. A 4/5 is very, very, very hard to take out with a single challenge. And the fact that you've got Rapunzel to heal him up and draw cards is great because you want him to be a sponge for damage, because then you can use Rapunzel to heal him, and then you draw cards, and then your opponent has to continue challenging into Maximus over and over and over again, and that 4 strength is nothing to scoff at. He can trade very consistently with middle to low grade things, and you just kind of keep this really nice tempo and defensive wall to protect cards like John Silver. So this card wins games. If you haven't played him or played against him, he's really, really, really powerful. He's a 6-drop, 5/5, 2 pips of lore, and he has a ability called Pick Your Fights. When you play this character and whenever he quests, chosen opposing character gains reckless during their turn. They cannot quest, and they must challenge if able. Who are they going to challenge? Maximus. What are they going to do? Get hurt really bad. 4 strength again is nothing to scoff at. Silver, this card is a great piece of disruption. You can put him on the field. Something cannot quest. You quest with him. Something cannot quest again. You can set up the Maximus play with Rapunzel. If you can't get it off and Maximus goes down due to challenging, you still have a healthy John Silver. Like, you're just kind of winning at all points. If you don't have Maximus on the board, that's okay. He's big enough that he can take a hit or 2 and take people down with him. So a very, very potent card. Mother Gothel, one of my favorite cards in the entire game. 6-drop, 3/6, 2 pips of lore. Skip the drama, stay with mama. While this character is exerted, opposing characters cannot quest. This is a raunchy combo because you can hide Mother Gothel behind Maximus. You quest with her, and the opponent has to chew through, 5 willpower on Maximus, 6 willpower on Mother Gothel. They need to have 11 damage on the board to stop her from readying up again and locking them out from questing. This is absolutely one of the best combos in your deck. And if your opponent doesn't have cards at the mid-range game, so again, if you play You Have Forgotten Me on turn 4 and they're top decking, their consistency is out the window. They have no reliability, no consistency. Now, depending on the color, if they're playing Amethyst, they might have cards like Ursula's Cauldron. If they're playing in Sapphire, they might have cards like Develop Your Brain. There are things that players can do to give themselves a little bit of consistency, but the reality is they're still at a really big detriment because they don't have any cards in their hand. They all got sniped away and sent into the discard pile. So if you can set up a Maximus on turn 5, well, here's the really raunchy play. So turn 2, you play Flynn Rider. Turn 3, you sing Sudden Chill with Flynn Rider. The opponent's probably not going to challenge him because they'll lose a second card. Turn 3, whatever, you can do Cheshire Cat, Mother Knows Best. That's kind of a open-ended space. Turn 4, you slap down You Have Forgotten Me as soon as you can. Get 2 cards out of your opponent's hand. Now they're in deep trouble. Turn 5, you play Maximus. And then turn 6, you play Mother Gothel. And the opponent is now on a clock because she's going to quest, Maximus is going to quest and support something. You've already got Flynn Rider on board. He quests for 2. Hopefully you have Lilo as well. She can quest for 1. Maybe you have Cheshire Cat online. He can quest for 2. You have all of these massive lore batteries that are questing for 2 or higher, hiding behind a Maximus. And realistically, your opponent has to answer the Mother Gothel. So they're going to completely ignore all those other bodies, and you can just kind of do whatever you want pretty freely. It's gross. Obviously, you have a really bad time if the opponent is playing Ruby and they play Be Prepared. But remember, that card costs 7 ink, and it's a big ask if you just, slap down You Have Forgotten Me and they don't have any cards in their hand. Oh, it's so nasty. I mean, you could see something in like a Sapphire Ruby ramp deck, but they're blowing their hand out so quickly with, cards like Belle and One Jump Ahead and Detective Mickey, and they're just putting so many cards into their inkwell, and then you clear them out of options with You Have Forgotten Me. Unless they top deck Be Prepared, you probably don't have to worry about it too much, to be really honest. This deck just kind of takes away options and forces the opponent to play with really limited resources. And then the last card in the deck is Stitch Rockstar. He's just here to shift as quickly as you can. He's a 3 lore battery. That's it. If you get Adoring Fans off, if you happen to hit one of your low-cost characters, like we only have 4 targets here. We have Lilo, Stitch New Dog, Cruella De Vil, and Flynn Rider. So there are 16 targets for the Adoring Fans. So the idea of the deck is not to build a Stitch Aggro or a Stitch Turbo kind of list. You're just putting in another excessively powerful lore battery. 3 pips of lore is fantastic. He's a 3/5 body. You can shift him up quickly. You can hide him behind Maximus. You can challenge into something. 3/5 is no joke. You can have him challenge, take 3 damage, and then you play Rapunzel to heal 3, draw 3 cards. He's just there as another bomb in the deck. Does he win games? No, but he's an important part of the deck to keep the pressure on the opponent, because you've got Stitch Rockstar with 3 pips of lore, and then you've got Mad Hatter with 3 pips of lore, so you can be very aggressive with your questing. You also have Hans with 3 pips of lore, so lots of great targets to put questing pressure on the opponent. And then John Silver is a great disruption tool. Mother Gothel stalls out the game. You've got Tinkerbell to answer evasive packages and just hurt the opponent if need be. I mean, this deck has just got options after options after options. Some of the bad matchups doesn't fare well into Steel. Steel can just blow out your characters with removal or Captain Hook or Prince Eric. They can then use New World to refill their hand if they get hit with You Have Forgotten Me. They're not afraid to pay into Flynn Rider because, again, if they can get New World and draw 7 cards, what do they care? So you do have to be careful for direct damage and hand refill. But if you can sustain past that point, you can still do the Maximus Mother Gothel combo, and it doesn't really matter what deck you're playing. You have to answer that. You can't just let that sit for more than 1 turn. You've kind of lost the game at that point. If 2 turns go by and your opponent cannot quest because of those 2 cards, it's very difficult to come back, like really, really, really difficult. So anyways, that is the nuts and bolts of hand disruption. We hope that everyone has a chance to build this deck and play it at their locals once Lorcana comes out on Friday. This is a super fun deck. Again, we're not really worried about the meta. We're not really worried about what's hot and what's not, because there are going to be many, many people playing the game, many, many people building decks. And once we have more tournament coverage, more events happening, more cards and more players out in the pool, then we'll definitely start talking about meta. But right now, it's just really hard to determine what is and isn't the best. So we're just focused on building decks that are fun, playing games with our friends, and multiplayer. We definitely recommend try out multiplayer at your local game shop. It is super fun. And again, don't forget, Sudden Chill, each opponent chooses and discards a card. Same thing for You Have Forgotten Me. Each opponent chooses and discards 2 cards. If you play this against 3 other people, their hands are toast by turn 4. And it's pretty funny to watch like 3 other players just not have anything to do other than top deck and pray that they get something good. So yeah, again, this is a really fun, really powerful deck. Try it out. Get some reps in. It is a little bit more complex than the other decks we've talked about, but once you get the combo lines down and you see how each card interacts with different game states, it's really fun. Very, very fun deck. So thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see everybody next time.